Welcome to Align and Elevate. Love who you are. A show where I can be me and you can be you. Let's get started. Today on Align and Elevate, we're going to talk about shadow work. So, shadow work, by definition, for me at least, is revealing the parts of yourself that have been hidden and covered up due to experiences in your life that didn't go well, perhaps. And from that space within, create beliefs about ourselves that can be negative or do not serve our best interest. One such belief, just as a quick example, is when I was young in school in art, maybe around middle school age. I honestly can't remember specifically. I would compare my stuff, my art, to other people's and feel like it wasn't as good as theirs. Or the teacher would not give me a very good grade on it. So I took on the belief that I was no good at art. And for 40 years, I believed that about myself. I would not even attempt to do art. And I would say things like, oh, I can't draw. I don't know how to paint. That kind of stuff. But in reality, art's very subjective. And yes, some are better than others. But in the realm of art, it's about expression. It's about what's inside of you coming out onto whatever medium you're using. So there is no good or bad. It just is. So that is one piece of shadow work that I have worked on in the last 10 years. And once I did that, I realized I am okay at art. And so my creativity level went up. I saw creativity in multiple ways. I believe creativity comes when we're cooking, when we can blend flavors together, textures. You can be creative with everyday tasks. So this piece of shadow work in psychology world is called self-limiting belief. Because due to an experience that I had way back in middle school, I said to myself, I'm not as good as someone else. And that might have been a little bit bolstered by the fact that another kid came up to me and said something about my art, or the teacher gave me a bad grade, or maybe the teacher corrected me all the time about something. And I took on that correction as I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm doing. So do you see now how these beliefs are created in the first place? It can start with something pretty small. One tiny little thing that we believe about ourselves, and then the slightest thing someone else says outside of you can add another layer to that same belief. And then another layer, and then another layer, and pretty soon you begin to believe it. You take it on and you become that part. That's the hardest part right there, is you become the self-limiting belief. And that becomes your shadow, because over enough time, you put it way back in the closet of your brain and you just forget about it. You move on. And 40 years later, you go, uh-oh, what if I missed all those opportunities to express myself through some mode of creativity? I wouldn't necessarily call this a regret per se, but it is kind of sad to me that I could have had more fun over those years doing some of that stuff, because now I really enjoy it. I recently attended an art intuitive retreat in North Carolina. I highly recommend Montaigne Blank. She's an excellent facilitator, in how to use our intuition and put it on paper. And she was so good about saying there is no right or wrong way. If you mess up, it's okay. There are different ways of putting the paint on the paper. It's okay. It's okay to cover up something that you don't like. It's okay to use weird colors. Combine the colors. Allowing those recesses of our mind to come out onto the page. It was a very healing process for me. And it allowed me to see some of my own shadows doing that process. Because you do it with no talking to anyone else. There's no music in the background to distract you. It's simply you, a piece of paper, and some paint and your thoughts. And you would be surprised how many thoughts you can have about yourself while you're doing this painting. So in some ways, shadow work is about awareness, of course, as always. I'm probably going to say that every time I'm on this podcast, because without awareness, you have no choice. And that is Joan Barnes' saying. Without awareness, you have no choice. One practice that we can do to understand more of our shadow can be looking back at the patterns of our life. If you're in your 20s, these patterns are going to be a little less than somebody that's in their 50s. But as a person in their 50s and only beginning this work in the last 10 years, I would highly recommend that you start this process when you're in your 20s. Your life will be more full and joyful. The best way that this process can be done is by sitting down by yourself in a quiet place. This is not necessarily a meditation per se, but almost. So get quiet in your mind. Let go of the dinner thoughts. Let go of the other ones that I got to go do this or do that. Take a nice breath in and out. Get yourself centered. And do a little life review. This is what I did in my early childhood years. This is what middle school was like. This is what high school was like. What your first jobs were. Who you lived with. What your relationships were. And this is a pattern review, not a life review. Don't go back and judge, this, that, or the other. Simply look at the patterns. Do I seem to not have as many friends due to a pattern that I created back when I was younger? I know I did. Every time I got close to someone back when I was, between the ages of 8 and 12 or so, my close friends, like best friends, would move away. So I kind of distanced myself from friends. I didn't want to be hurt again. Well, I know now that that's bullshit. Honestly, life's better with friends. So be prepared when you begin to do this work. Stuff's going to come up, and if you have a trusted friend that will not judge you or a spouse that will not judge you, that you can talk it out with someone, it helps a lot. If you don't have those things, then seek some professional help through a therapist or people that do energy work typically understand shadow work. I highly recommend having someone to help you walk through this process. I have used multiple different people for this. Sometimes this work gets a little heavy because you are dredging up old things that you've buried, and that's where maybe listening to somebody on YouTube or this podcast or another podcast or a book can give you some help with this. And shadow work's not new. In psychology, they call it something else, and we call it shadow work in the spiritual realm. I kind of like to call it finding my light, however, or uncovering my light, because that's what all those beliefs have done over these years is they've dampened my light. I've become smaller. I've squashed that little bit of joy due to these beliefs. So once you begin to uncover these things about yourself, your life becomes a little bit lighter, a little brighter. And people will start to notice that you're a little bit different. People will see that little difference in you, and it can be a microscopic difference. It doesn't have to be an entire makeover. You would be surprised how much a micro change in your own perspective can change the people around you. So if you're in a relationship or a job or something that you're not happy with, you changing one tiny perspective about yourself can shift the whole thing. And it may not make you just absolutely love the job that you didn't like, but at least you feel a little better about it and you look at it differently. Might be a little bit happier. And maybe that slight happiness change can help you unfold something else about yourself. And maybe another job or a career or hopefully a passion that you would rather do comes around quicker. Like a little step on the ladder. When I personally got into massage, I saw it as a step out of doing the ultrasound x-ray hospital work that I did. I would literally walk down the halls of the hospital after doing medical work for 30 years and say, I am one step closer to retiring from this. Every morning, I did this for months. I walked down the hallway as I walked in the hospital, and I said, I am one step closer to retiring from this work. It gave me the focus and drive to finish massage school. It's the best thing I ever did because it led me to this moment right now of talking to you on this podcast. I would have never done that before without taking that step of going into massage. That's truly the first step that I began to look at how energy works and consciousness and the big pictures of life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was awesome. So just to recap a little bit, your mission is, if you choose to, is to notice your patterns of life. Write them down. Just a few of them. Don't overwhelm yourself. Say, oh yeah, this brought me joy as a kid. Why do I not do that anymore? Why'd I quit doing that? And then you can choose either to pick it up or not. It's okay. Maybe you're not interested in what you were interested in as a child. But at least you understand it. And you uncover those pieces of you that maybe you do want to do again. Like I love to do art again. I mean, I don't do art every day. But, they have those cool wine parties where you go and paint and drink with friends. I've done several of those now. When I went to the retreat, I had no expectation or trepidation on what I was going to do. I didn't compare myself to anyone. I just knew it is what it is. I went with an open mind. And I felt so much better about myself after I did that process. I highly encourage it. So find that little bitty piece of you that you have hidden away in the closet. Bring it out into the light. Start to think about it, examine it. And just say, do I want that piece of me back? If you do, great. Pull it back into yourself and begin to express it in the outer world. So if you have any questions, you can leave a comment and I will try to cover it on the next podcast. So happy exploring. And I will see you on the next podcast next week. Thanks for listening.